Back to this paper on memes as replicators. It says, memes, like genes, are judged against one simple, unambiguous criterion: their ability to perpetuate themselves in the prevailing environment, if possible, or by modifying their environment if necessary. I think this is where embodying one's mania comes in a little bit too, is that there might have been some memes that came about in mania that can be embodied after being harvested. And also this would change the environment too. So if I need to go out and about in order to do random acts of kindness, that's going to change the environment in which I am, genetically expressing myself mimetically and experimenting with some of those memes. And I think mania is like a big experiment with different memes, and it's a meme creating process. It's a learning process. It's like another brain growth. I think that society needs to be designed in a different way to actually support some of these memes. So people that have visions and creative insights, there needs to be a way for people to collaborate together to change society, and also society needs to change in order to support some of these other memes and say the fact that there are a lot of highly sensitive people out there. And I think part of what gets changed in the process of epimimetics and endomimetics when one is in mania is that one sees that other things are possible. And that's one of the reasons why people need to retest reality and retest gravity and retest one's abilities. It's almost like when we're children and how we need to climb on a chair and fall off in order to feel the effects of gravity. That happens again when a person goes into that learning state, that innocence of mind. And from that space, one can actually create new memes and prune the memes that aren't helpful. And one might end up pruning oneself back to someone that resembles what one was before, but there's still a growth in that process. And I mentioned how the paper says symbiotic memes, which promote behavior adaptive for both themselves and the genes, will be doubly successful in the long term, for genes will design brains or epigenetic rules to be receptive or creative of such memes. And I think what goes along with that is that in manic consciousness, one is actually in the state of creating new memes constantly all the time. Yet, right now as it is, the people that have those brains that actually go into hypermimetics get diagnosed with a mental illness and then put on medication that suppresses that process. So then we don't learn about the process and we don't facilitate one moving through it because of the false statements out there about it getting worse over time and things like that. And I've gone into that process 3 more times since the very initial one, and each time it's been more and more mild and quicker. And if I was put on stronger and stronger medications each time, I don't know if that would have been the case. It probably would have appeared as worse and worse. I read somewhere else too, I can't remember where it was, but it talked about how this process of map consciousness is probably has a sociobiological function not yet recognized. And I think that's true. It's something to do with the socialness and the biology, and maybe part of it is actually that we're supposed to make meaning and have dialogue with each other, not just argue over opinions and beliefs. We're actually supposed to be creative in our perceptions and talk about them. Like if I would have someone with me the whole time I'm in that hyper mimetic state, we would sort of be comparing memes and making memes and saying what we saw and perceive like a big grand experiment, like we are the experimenters. And I feel like part of this shift, part of this transformation is going from words to being and perception. And it's not just going from words to being and perception, but going from being used by words, by memes that are reinforcing the DNA of those memes, which are the meanings we've been given by society, the equations we've been given by society, to actually creating our own meanings. And that's what happens in trans consciousness. That's what happens in mania. And sometimes we can create meanings that might be detrimental, but it's still about creating our own meanings and moving towards the meanings that we create. And it's perceiving and acting based on our own meanings versus conceptualizing and regurgitating old meanings, which are no longer meaningful because they have nothing to do with the present moment, so they're actually meaningless. And then we wonder why people go into this hyper meaningful state of mania. And it's in order to create some meaning out of our perceptions versus being totally demeaned by our own voice in our own head. And our own voice in our own head deafens us to the memes of possible meaning. And I think part of it too is, since the meanings are always infinitely unfolding, it's important not to necessarily believe them, because once one believes one, it's going to create an accumulation. And that accumulation, as soon as one thing is grasped onto, it's actually going to limit what can come next. And I was thinking that reality is all a game of make-believe. It's the powers that be trying to make us believe whatever it is, with the advertising, with education. And believing is recording, and recording is part of the ego process. And I also feel like our ego mind talking is sort of recording over our body, so we're not actually perceiving our body, we're not actually perceiving the recording instrument. We're not perceiving that we have eyes. We're not aware that we have eyes. We're not aware we have a body, because we're always conceptualizing and abstracting and creating images. And those images are almost being superimposed over our body and not even feeling our body. We don't have a clear mind screen. It's polluted with these images, and we're meeting the present moment and reality with these images on our mind screen. So it blocks proper perception, and it also blocks our perception of our body because we're in our heads. It's like we are the special message, and we are the special messenger, and we are the special message creator. And I feel like this process is trying to connect us with our ability to make other meaning. We have the meanings of the ego and success and individuality, and we don't have the greater meaning of what it is to be human. And it's like this thermodynamic ego process. It goes from static and linear to dynamic, and we become these dynamic perspective takers. And consciousness is a non-local phenomenon, and the ego keeps it somewhat localized in our head. But really, it moves with wherever we're putting our attention. And most of the time, our attention's in the past or something, on some memory. And I feel like it's not a mental illness, it's a perceptual sensitivity. One that we all have.